Yeah. That's clear, isn't it?
As a reminder, if you are speaking to the IP or the remote folks, it's this white camera on the wall if you want to make eye contact with them. I know it can be a little bit confusing because we can see it there, but your best eye contact is this camera.
Sounds good.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
I know it's a new setup for us.
Yeah. All right. We have the facility. We're connected. So I'll turn it over to you, Becky.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Holmes Larson, Executive Officer of Hearings and Release on the Supervised Release Board. We're here today to review Joseph Bergeron, who's present by video at the Minnesota Department of Corrections facility in Stillwater. Here with me at the Minnesota Department of Corrections Central Office is our Commissioner seated to my left. He is Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell. Also present are members Christine Bray, Cheryl Ramstad, Andrew Larson, and we have juvenile expert Donald Strufert here today. And we also have our newest board member, Joe Earhart, observing today on screen. Our records indicate that on September 15th, 1988, Mr. Bergeron and two juvenile accomplices entered into the Minneapolis, Minnesota residence of Thomas Berger with the intent to commit burglary. Mr. Berger was involved in a relationship with Mr. Bergeron's sister. During the burglary, Bergeron stabbed Mr. Berger 4 times in the back, 2 times in the chest, and 2 times in the abdomen, causing his death. Prior to his death, Mr. Berger was able to identify Mr. Bergeron as the one who stabbed him. On April 11th of 1989, Joseph John Bergeron was sentenced to life imprisonment by Hennepin County District Court after having been found guilty of first-degree murder. Mr. Bergeron was originally reviewed by the Commissioner of Corrections and his advisory panel on September 11th of 2002. This was his 14-year initial review. He was continued for a future review in 3 years. He was transitioned through minimum custody and work release and eventually paroled on February 10th of 2011. He was restructured 2 times while in the community. Then, on October 23rd, 2014, he was found in violation of his conditions of release for new criminal behavior, specifically use of intoxicants, driving under the influence, interfering with police, and fleeing. He was returned to the custody of the Department of Corrections to address chemical dependency treatment programming. Mr. Bergeron was offered the opportunity to participate in additional reviews by the Commissioner and Advisory Panel, both on January 16th of 2018 and January 15th of 2020. He chose not to participate in those reviews. Today's review with the Supervised Release Board is his 10th review after approximately 33 years. Mr. Bergeron, thank you for participating today. I have one question for you. On your certification of rights form, you did not mark whether or not you were ready to proceed. Are you ready to proceed for your review today?
Yes, ma'am. I just must have missed it. I just must have missed it.
I just wanted to make sure you were ready. Thank you for attending. I'll turn this over to the board. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. I appreciate having you here today. Can you start out by just talking about and providing some context around deciding to come today, and why that is, and what's different?
All right. Well, at the risk of brevity, some of which I was returned to prison by Commissioner Tom Roy, and at that time, I was told by my agent and my lawyer that there was certain rules and such that they had to follow in terms of my re-imprisonment. Tom Roy didn't follow any of them rules. So initially, with the help of my attorney, we filed several legal actions with varying degrees of responses and successes. So I was told initially by my lawyer that the legality of a contract doesn't matter if you agree to it. If you agree to an illegal contract and sign it, you are still bound by that contract. So initially, it was his advice that I just pursue the legal avenue and not participate in, at the time, we believed was an illegal contract, the parole board, because I was already had been paroled. So as such, revocation law reigns supreme, and the parole board does not. As you are aware, there's been a number of legal actions that your attorney has taken part of. I don't know how. I guess I should. Maybe I'm speaking. Maybe you're not as aware because it's not part of your deal. You have the legal firm do it, but you at least somewhat know that there's been legal actions. Those are done for the most part. And my lawyer, to be perfectly frank, part of my agreement with my lawyer was that he would pursue and help me if I was willing to take action, legal action against the Bloomington Police Department. And I declined to do that, so I lost him. So a lot of it's been on my own up till now. At this point, I'm here because I think I should be, I guess. I mean, I don't have a better answer, Okay. If I can expand or say more, please let me know.
Go ahead. If there's something else you'd like to let us know, please do.
In terms of why I'm here, I think I'm just here because I think I should be. I think it's the right thing to do at this juncture. In terms of that reason, that's it. If there's something else you want to know in relation to it, I'd be willing to share that.
Well, I think here, I guess one of the things that it's a little confusing for me, just to be frank, is that when you were brought back, it appeared as though that the goal or expectation was that you would address or participate in some level of chemical dependency intervention program treatment, whatever that was, and that was a path, and the other path was the due process path, and I don't ever fault anybody for exercising their due process rights, but I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is your thinking around the difference between wouldn't at some level it have been easier to just follow through on the substance use disorder treatments path and avoid some of the, potentially years of incarceration? And I guess that's the question.
Okay. So when I was on the street, and I think this is all relevant to my thinking, whether you understand it or not, I started, I don't have family, I don't have money, I don't have anything. I grew up in the hood. When I got on the street, I had $2,000 in my pocket, and that was it. So all I could do was go to work, and that's what I did. and I worked, 18 and 20 hours a day, 7 days a week at times for years. And as a result, I moved around a little bit, but before my incarceration, I owned a house. I had a very good job. I was a supervisor for Jacobs Electrical Commercial. I was, I had my truck, my car. I had built a life. I housed my handicapped mother. I housed my sister-in-law and my 9-year-old niece, my wife. And I took care of all that. All that financial burden was mine, and I'm not complaining. I was proud that I was able to do that. And I was proud that I was able to provide that for them. And things were good. Because of my mistake, because I went out and had a drink with fellow workers to celebrate, again, a bad decision, but to celebrate my position as a supervisor for Jacobs. I got the DUI. So I immediately reported that DUI to my agent, and my agent had me come in, and I did everything I was supposed to do, and I asked her, well, we talk, whatever. She told me, listen, I don't like this. She says, but when something like this happens, you've done everything that we want people to do. So she says, you go home, go back to work, and let me know when there's a final adjudication of this. And I says, okay. It was a little while later, Tom Roy issued the warrant, and I was re-imprisoned. I was panicky because of the responsibility I had, not only for my family, but for my job and everything else. And my lawyer at the time told me that they could keep me up till 90 days. And that made me sick to my stomach because I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay my bills. I didn't know how I was going to be able to take care of my family. I didn't know how I was going to continue to do all these things. I didn't know what I was going to say to my employer. Well, come to find out, he could hold me a lot more than 90 days. And he, at the time, gave me a year set off. Well, in that year's amount of time, when I was working with my lawyer, he told me the legalities and the due process, as you pointed out, and we'll get this worked out. But over time, as my family became homeless, as my house was taken away, as my cars were, my automobiles were taken back, bank took them, as everything went away, as everything fell apart. And there was nothing that I could do to help any of them. And my sister-in-law became worse. She was victimized by some gang activity because she was trying to find a place for her and her niece, and she inadvertently wound up in jail as a result, in prison, actually. So I was dealing with a lot that was overwhelming to me. And all I could see was, how can I help? I need to help. I need to get, and I was angry. I was upset. And very angry, very upset for a long time. I was certain that the due process issue would pan out, especially with the Bergeron 590 decision that said the commissioner was bound by revocation of law. And I was frightful that I could be released and having tried to put a life back together and wind up back in prison because I jaywalked and I know that's a little excessive, but just my point being, and again, I'm not diminishing the fact that I drank. I am just saying that it was a huge penalty and a lot of people suffered as a result. And it was my opinion, I don't have AOD issues. I never drank or used anything in prison before or after. I went through treatment while I was here before, and when I went to treatment, they wanted to kick me out because they said my AOD was negative. It was Benson that made a phone call. It said he wanted me to stay in there anyway, so I went through there and I completed it. The AOD for me is not an issue. I made a mistake. I'll never do it again. I don't struggle with it. I'm not have any desire to use anything. I just don't do it. And like my lawyer said, if it was an authentic thing, if it was something that somebody really believed that I needed, that could have been accomplished while I was on the street. It would have been paid for by my insurance plan rather than the taxpayer. And we at the time just thought it was a reason to keep me incarcerated. So that's the most honest I can be with you about it.
That's fair. Was there a point at which you gave up? I asked this question because I think, there certainly, there was a change in commissioner. There were some of those things that may have looked different. I don't know, but I guess I'm asking the question: did you, beyond the legal side, was there a point that you just gave up and said, "I'm just stuck anyway, so I'm not going to do it," or was it really more out of anger and frustration with process?
With this process here?
Well, with the fact that you're reincarcerated.
Yeah, I mean both. But the legal process only recently came to a relative conclusion. And again, and I'm not asking, but I don't know how aware you are with that. But so when the appellate court made a decision in the Bergeron 590 case saying that the commissioner was bound by revocation rules and laws and so on and so forth, but they chose not to provide a judgment because they relied on an earlier decision, the Baylor decision, which says habeas relief can only be achieved through constitutional imperfections. The newer decision is Pollard, which says that it can provide statutory relief, which is what they should have done. But because of that imperfection, I have been litigating that aspect of it thereafter continually by one means or another, including the federal court. I think the last decision I got was a denial from the United States Supreme Court for certiorari. But the last hearing that you had provided or you had set up, I was still involved in litigation. So it wasn't so much giving up. I was just going down that route, and I was believing the tutelage and the education I was given by people that were smarter than me legally, and so on and so forth.
So let me I think take a step forward. What would you like to see happen?
Well, Commissioner, I don't know. I mean, because the thing is it's your decision, right? So, what I can tell you, if it's a decision, of public safety, I'm not a threat to anybody. I work for a living. Even here, and he'll testify, I I've had gang members come up to my cell and try to attack me in my cell. There was a fight there that I refused to get involved in because I am against gang, against crime, against drugs. There was a guy that snuck up behind me on the flag and hit me, and I got 8 stitches in the back of my head. They put the guy that killed my cousin, Officer Joe Bergeron, 2 cells down from me on 8, and he lived there for a year. All these things were very, very aggravating and overwhelming to me, but I'm not willing to even know that I didn't think I was ever getting out. I'm not willing to do bad behavior or do things wrong. So if it's an issue of public safety, there is no issue. I'm not a threat to public safety. I work for a living. I have 3 master's degrees in HVACR. I am a journeyman electrician. I definitely have an opportunity at almost 60 to still have a very good employment and still be able to work 10 years that was required for the minimal level of Social Security, and ideally have work someplace where there is some kind of retirement package, so I am not a burden on the taxpayer, so I am not a burden on the state. So if you want to keep me in prison for whatever reason, there's nothing I can argue with you about that. That's your choice, and you being a person that has been in law enforcement for many years and is very intelligent in terms of these things. So I'm not going to sway you one way or another. You are far more intelligent than I am. But if it's based on threats, there is no threat. As far as that drinking incident, way bad. It'll never happen again, in or out of prison. As far as a threat to anybody, I am not.
So let me just ask this question: Have you you may not have you looked at recently at your lifer book packet? Have you participated or looked at any of that stuff?
A little bit with Mr. Lynch.
Okay. Did you look at the comprehensive risk assessment, which is the psychological, which was done without your participation? Did you look at that at all?
Are you referring to something specific? I don't know.
So, but the specific thing I'm looking at is the assessment, and the psychologist who did it, indicates and says it is thought that he would present a moderate to high risk of future violence. Now, that certainly is not informed by the opportunity to speak with you, right? Because it was informed more by record reviews and some of those sorts of things. So what's your reaction to that, number one? And number two, do you wish that you had participated in the assessment so that potentially, what you're telling the board would be perhaps reflected in this assessment?
I don't know. At the time that it was suggested to me that my participation wouldn't really affect it one way or another because they're going to come to their own conclusion based on their own information. And I kind of believed that. But as far as that risk assessment, I think it's an error for sure. If you look at the totality of my life, both in and out of prison, I don't know how anybody could come to that conclusion. I've been well, like I said, this incarceration, 10 years, I've been in ample situations where if I was where a lot of people would think they have a right to react violently. I chose not to. I chose not to on the street. I am a building maintenance worker. I've been there for 10 years. I go to every block, every place in the institution. I deal with tons of different behaviors, different personalities, outbursts. I mean, I have more potential problems on any given day than most inmates, and I make the right decisions. I do well, and I am not violent. My initial crime was a violent crime. There was no violence before. There was no violence afterwards. So I would have to challenge where she comes up with that determination.
And so, you talk about the fact that there was no violence, other than your life sentence crime, no violence before, no violence after, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And so here, this becomes the challenge because, that fact, what you just said is a fact of that, I just have to take it at face value that is the case, that there wasn't violence before, there wasn't violence after, which we would have an established record of. That said, this was a life sentence crime, and there wasn't a record prior to that would indicate that you would be involved in that kind of conduct. So that's number one. And then number two, you certainly, just given the term of your involvement in the system, have, thought about kind of this whole notion of criminal thinking. And again, I don't want to tie criminal thinking to an exercise of due process. But I also think about sometimes, there is a practical reality. Well, let me just look at this, ask this practical question. If the board were to say to you today, Mr. Bergeron, we hear you, we'd like to, but you know what? In order to do anything, for us to feel a level of comfort, we want you to complete a substance use disorder treatment program, or at a minimum, be reassessed and follow that recommendation. What would your response to that be?
I'm willing to be reassessed, and I'm not unwilling to do treatment. Here's my issue, Mr. Commissioner, is like the last time. Granted, this time I do have the DUI and the admitted usage. But like the last time, when the assessment found that I needed treatment. So I agreed to go to treatment. It was Atlantis at the time. Then when they talked to people, whatever, they went around and talked to people in the institution, they talked to my family, and realized that I had a negative AOD, and they wanted to remove me from treatment because I have no history. Again, at that time, Dennis Benson stepped in and had them keep me there. And I went through it, although modified a little bit. So am I willing to go? Yeah. Are they willing to keep me? Who knows? Because I have no history. The only struggle I have no struggle. There's never been a single struggle. There has been a problem with me making a bad decision and picking up that DUI afterwards, which is even a worse decision. But if you're asking, will I be assessed? Would I go based on a potential release? Yes, I would.
Right. There, at least in the record, there was some indication that while you were on release status, there was a couple of restructures. Can you just explain those? What happened in those?
Yeah, and the one, the first one was when I moved to a different location. That's the first one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was the tardy one? I'm sorry, I'm getting confused in the timeline here.
It doesn't matter. Just like we're just looking at.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
what happened.
the tardy, the first one was when I was late or supposedly late when my ISR agent showed up. So she showed up to my house when I was in my garage putting together cabinets. And my wife's daughter's boyfriend answered the door, said I wasn't there. A few minutes later, I was told that they had showed up. So I called her back incessantly for a period of time and saying, listen, I'm here. I was just in the garage. I'm here, please. And she didn't pick up. So the task force showed up. They did what they do. You know, they made me blow on the thing and checked the house, looked around, and they arrested me. So I was released a couple days later on that. But to ISR's credit, after that, they would come to my garage first. Because at the time I was remodeling houses, that was my employment, and a lot of stuff was preparation in my garage. So they would come there first, so that problem would never happen again. So I was grateful to them for that. The second one was an issue I had with sister-in-law's friends who needed a place to stay. I let them stay in the basement for a while, and there was problems with the house. So they had, and I don't think you know all this, but just to be perfectly honest with you, there was a point where they had marijuana in the basement, and my wife told me they had marijuana in the basement, so I called and told them they had to leave the house. You had to be gone. Get out of the house. But I can't have any of that, blah, blah, blah. So they left, and then they called my agent and said that I was doing any number of horrible things. So I immediately went to the fourth precinct to show that I was close to my house, and I called my agent from there. I said, I'm at the fourth precinct, it's all bullshit. And then she required me to then come in and pee in a cup and all these other things, blah, 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 yakety smackety. There were some other problems that he continued to make, and there was problems with the house. So I got with my agent. I said, I'm going to move to Coon Rapids in my niece's basement for a while. It was well documented. It was well laid out, and she went out of her way to document it and lay it out. So I said, all right, thank you, appreciate it. So I got a new agent, Bill Linden. And he apparently went to the old house in South Minneapolis looking for me. When I was at work, I got a call from a friend of mine saying, Joe, what did you do? I said, what do you mean, what did I do? He said, the feds are looking for you. I said, the feds? They said, yeah, they gave me a number. So I called this supposedly Fed number. Nobody answered. I called Bill Linden. I said, listen, supposedly the feds are looking at what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And Bill Linden says, well, did you do anything wrong? I said, no. He says, where are you at? I says, I'm working. He said, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you got nothing to worry about. I says, okay. So, and I get another call from somebody else talking about these feds. Look, I called Bill Linden back a second time. I said, Bill, these people are still, tell me what you want me to do. I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Tell me. He says, if you haven't done anything wrong, you're fine. So I'm working, so it's just an interruption in my workday. I call my wife. I said, this is the number they gave me. Please call these people and find out what's going on. And she says, okay, I will. And we're doing my thing. So she finally calls me back. She says, Joe, it's not the feds, it's the task force. Your agent put out a freaking warrant for your arrest. I called Bill Linden back. I said, Bill, you put the warrant out for my arrest. He says, oh, yeah, I did. You're not living where you're supposed to be. I said, what are you talking about? Yes, I am. He says, no, you're not. I said, what do you want me to do, Bill? He says,
let me
come in.
Let me just get to the end of the story here, because it ended in a restructure, right? In the end?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I get that, yeah, something happened that didn't go well. So I got the point.
I don't mean to belabor the point. I'm just trying to share with as much information with you as I can about it so you have it.
Okay. All right. All right. Do others have questions for Mr. Bergeron?
Well, I do, Mr. Bergeron. Kind of going back to the fact that you violated your parole and you ended up back in prison. And were you sober completely prior to the time you had drinks with your colleagues?
Yes.
And how many drinks did you have? Because ending up with a DUI is, sort of a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And it's because of the drink. It's my bad decision. So to be, again, 100% honest with you, I was just celebrating the fact that I'm now the supervisor for Jacobs Electric.
Right. How many
and
drinks
when I was there, I had a few. But my point being is I had a few and I started feeling dizzy or odd in my head. And rather than make the smart decision to call a cab or do something else, I said, I'm feeling odd, I got to leave. And I jumped in my car and left, which was the worst decision. So that's how that happened. But I panicked. And when I panicked, I made the worst decision.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, what it raises for me is if you go out on parole again, or when you go out on parole again, is something like that going to happen again? Just another stupid mistake and I'm not asking the question. I'm just telling you that's what it leaves me thinking. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, the assessment that was done most recently, you didn't participate in, and part of that you said was the rationale for getting moderate risk to reoffend, but you did participate in 2017. This is after you were sent back, and in 2015, and you got the same risk level. Are you saying that's because you were told to go to CD treatment and the first time you did, but they had you leave, and then you didn't go in 17?
You mean the psychological review are you talking about?
Yeah, you were at those two. You participated.
No, I did not. I did not. She called me up and she asked me to sign a Tiananmen agreement or something. I forget what the name of it was. But she wanted me to sign this Tiananmen agreement, this, that, and the other, if I wanted to be involved. And I said no. I said, tell the because one of Commissioner Roy's thing was you didn't say on the advice of counsel. So I told her at the time, and I remember it distinctly, I says, on the advice of counsel, I choose not to participate. So that's...
So is that for 2017 and 2015? I understand you didn't participate in the last...
Yeah, I haven't participated in any of it since my return to prison. So that's an error by somebody, but I haven't and a lot of it, again, was in relation, at that time, was in relation to my legal pursuits, and which is why I used his terms that he wanted me to use. On the advice of counsel, I choose not to participate.
Thank you. I thank you for clarifying. I thought you had participated in those.
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I guess I do have one, and it's just to make sure that I'm understanding it correct. So I think Commissioner asked if going forward, if is there a willingness on your part to comply with the directives that were originally given in 2014, I think is when you came back, the treatment, that there is willingness on your part?
If you want me to take an evaluation and then follow through with that evaluation, I would do that. But I guess I'm not worried enough. It doesn't matter because I might die in prison anyway. But the fact that I could get into treatment, they can once again say, well, you have no history other than this DUI, therefore you didn't be here. Then the commissioner says, well, that's a program failure. You screwed up. Is where I worry, I guess, or I have apprehension. But your question is, would I follow through with it? Yes.
Can I just ask one other question, and then we'll bring this to an end? I guess I want to just, I know that, you know, we're having some of the conversations here are really focused on your return, reincarceration, and the revocation side, and then, you know, really what the next steps are and how to address or respond to that. But I want to go back. I'm going to go back to the fundamental reason that you were in prison, and that was taking the life of a young man. What obligation do you feel you continue to have because of your taking of another person's life?
Well, I mean, education, of course, and it's what I continue to do. It's what I did on the street. It's what I do here, and it has nothing to do with. It's personal. It's like I tell people, it's not where you live, it's how you live. So, and that's fundamental to us as humans. And if we're ever going to evolve as a species, we must recognize we're all humans, and there's never a reason to get so overwhelmed or get so angry or get so that you result in hurting somebody else. There's always a better decision. There's always another decision. There's always a moment to take a breath. There's always a moment to step back. There's always a moment to reconsider. There's multiple decisions that you can make rather than responding impulsively. And I involve myself in that very, very assertively all the time, especially in this environment, because it is so hostile and people tend to want to react in a hostile manner, and that can always potentially result in the most dire of circumstances.
That's helpful. And so you, and this is different than how you were prior to your life sentence offense? Or, you know, so what's the difference, right? Because you said you lived kind of that way prior to your offense, and then after, but there was it an isolated incident of bad judgment, or what was this?
Well, what I said, I wasn't violent, I wasn't hostile, I wasn't aggressive. Again, I'm not complaining, I'm just for issues of clarity for you. I grew up in the street, I grew up in the hood, and my mother was a horrible alcoholic. So it was me and my sister, and my main obligation in life, and I felt like it was taking care of my sister and looking out for her. And that's what I did most of my young life. I wasn't educated. When I came to prison, my education level was 6th or 8th grade. I was a dumb, stupid kid who loved his sister. And Tom, God rest his soul, was a major drug dealer in North Minneapolis, and he's beating my sister and putting her in her hospital over and over again. And my mother made it very clear to me that something had to be done to stop this. I was young. I was 21. I was scared to death. I was scared of him. He was 33. Yeah, he was a Hell's Angel, and it was all fear. And that's what I tell people here too. Fear can get people to do the worst things. Fear is the absolute worst thing to have. And I went over there and not intending to take his life, intending to somehow be aggressive, somehow be assertive with my cousin and his friend, and to somehow diminish what was going on. And that didn't work at all. So was it an isolated incident? Yeah, but it was a horrible isolated incident. It was, and I live with that to this day. It bothers me. I'm almost 60 years old, and I still have nightmares from time to time about it. But yes, it was an isolated incident.
Okay, thank you.
I would
Yeah.
just have one more question. And I ask this question largely because your situation is a little bit different than some of the others that we've seen, because you have been paroled and are now back. So that's why I'm going to phrase this question the way I am. Do you feel as though someone who is released under supervised release on a charge such as yours, the murder charge, do you feel as though they should be held to a higher standard than perhaps someone who is under, supervised release for some other offense? And I asked the question largely because you're there 11 years after being returned. And so I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts on that. Like there's an element that it feels like a little bit of self-destructiveness almost. And I don't know a better way to describe it, and perhaps I'm wrong, but does that question make sense to you?
A little bit. So, I mean, to a higher standard, yeah, I mean, to agree, I agree with you. I think, yes, they should be held to a higher standard. The conviction itself, without diminishing crime, the conviction itself can sometimes not be 100% right in terms of the first-degree murder, second-degree murder, because we know there's people with second-degree murder with horrible, horrible crimes that, because they're on that second-degree murder standard, don't fall under this standard. But all that being said, I think that you guys, as you change from time to time, do hold them to a higher standard instantly to transition towards release in the first place. Because we have people that horrify me, people that are convicted of murders that horrify me, that live horribly their whole sentence, and then are unleashed onto the community, which makes me sick to my stomach. So, but that happens every day. But again, the answer to your question is yes, they should be held to a higher standard just based on the conviction, because you guys are not here to determine the legality of the conviction. You're here to determine safety for the community and somebody that's not going to ideally make you look bad for the decisions that you've made. So I do think that based on that, yeah, there should be a higher standard. And I understand why you look more intimately into people that come before you. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it does.
No,
Fair enough. Appreciate it.
I have one more for you.
Sure.
I just want you to think back to 2022, because I'm looking at like a 19 or 20 page assessment by the psychologist where you're quoted several times. And you said, no, I never met with one.
As God is my witness, ma'am, as God is my witness, I never have met with them or talked with them at all.
That's good enough. That's good enough. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bergeron, I want to just provide you with any last opportunity to provide or make any closing comments to the board prior to us talking about next steps.
I don't know. I think that I've done all I can. I think you guys are, you're sharper than I am. You're making a hard decision. And I don't think that I can influence a lot. All I can share with you, and I think that the record and the history proves it out, is I am no threat to the community in or out of prison. And two, I have a skill set that allows me to be employed in ways that even at 60 provide opportunity for me not only to do very well for myself but for others. I will be successful wherever I'm at. If you leave me here, I will continue to be successful here. If I am released, I will be successful there. The incident that got me in prison will never happen again, ever.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the discussion. During discussion deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would just open it to the board for any discussions, thoughts, observations.
Well, he was right. I was looking at a different report. So I have 2015 and I have 2017 from him, and he claims he wasn't present, and I don't know any different.
I think it may have been reports very similar to the one we have here, where it was the reports were done in absentia.
Right, that's why I went back and requested the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So just want everyone to know that.
So I agree with some of what he says, and I hope he hears it. I think he does have a skill set. However, I mean, the fact remains there's an unmet directive, and I just, it does feel somewhat self-defeating, and I hope that he does take the opportunity to do what he says. I mean, I would not be in favor of releasing him to supervised release until the directives that have been issued previously are met. I mean, that's just where I'm at.
I'm there as well. I mean, whether it's an assessment or whatever. I mean, I can't say what would have happened or anything, and I don't, as I said earlier, don't have an issue with somebody like exercising their rights, but at some point in time, addressing the issue that existed based off of bona fide conduct, the DWI and the resulting decisions that came from there, which I think included maybe some fleeing or something like that. That was a part of that. I think from a public safety standpoint, whether he would agree or not is immaterial. But I think I'm guessing that that's what really informed the decision, and then the kind of like and again, I don't want to minimize the fact that he had legal counsel where they provided advice, and that's that. But it also speaks to this whole notion of like prove it, make me, some of that kind of stuff, which tends to be a little bit more in the criminal thinking court, and that concerns me. I am glad to hear that he would be willing to follow through, but we have a man here who spent 10 years in prison that potentially wouldn't have needed to. And you know, I hear what he's saying, that he has an opportunity to walk out and, you know, become an electrician, do whatever that he can make a good living, and that's fortunate for him. But I think to your point, making sure that this issue is not an issue is certainly would be on my list, number one. And number two, I do think that you know, he had a lengthy period, term of incarceration. He was out in the community for a good chunk of time, but he has been locked up for almost twice as long as he was out. And I am admittedly concerned about just the process of stepping down. Again, I think it's one step at a time. I wouldn't mind seeing him have an assessment or even moving to a medium site where treatment could be provided, and having that assessment and being in a spot. But I would rather have him move, because I'm really not comfortable with releasing him from close custody after 10 years. That's just me.
Well, my thought wasn't even stepping to minimum. It really was.
I meant medium, just.
Or medium, right. I think you said that. My thought was more two isolated incidents that resulted first in a murder, and now, you know, he's back in prison. I'd really worry about the next isolated incident should he get out. So I would really favor CD treatment, and if they say, oh, it's not appropriate, then I think mental health is pretty crucial here. And a release plan.
At a minimum, yeah.
So are we needing a motion? Because I would make a motion to deny granting of supervised release at this time, in terms of, you know, when we would come back to re-review, certainly open for discussion. I know that there's, you know, wait lists and that sort of stuff. And I don't know, maybe Commissioner, you would have a better sense on what is a realistic, you know, time frame to come back. I mean, are we talking a year, 18 months, 2 years?
I mean, but if we were to look at, you know, the treatment, and depending upon what treatment program he went into, would be assessed into, and then, you know, just this whole, you know, for me, it would be that, and I would like to see him actually participate in the risk assessment process, so that, you know, that right now we have a moderate to high risk, and based upon file reviews and those sorts of things, I would really be interested in knowing like what an actual assessment would look like if he participated in it. And so that would be an additional item that I'd like to see happen. And, you know, I think would be, and then I think obviously if his objective is to be out, then begin to really work on a comprehensive release plan, and then come back in 18 months and see where we are. So
That makes sense to me.
So you want to move that?
Yes, consider that moved.
Okay, that's a motion.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, let's vote on a motion before us. To the motion, Board Member Bray.
Yes.
Board Member Earhart abstains. Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstead?
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. The motion prevails. Mr. Bergeron, we're going to, the parole's denied. Obviously, a re-release is denied. We would be looking at you to address, participate in substance use treatment as may be indicated by treatment staff there. Number one. Number two, participate in complete comprehensive assessment and develop a comprehensive release plan to present back to us in 18 months. Any questions about that?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back in and move on with Mr. Brown. He was leaving that for me.
It's gonna leap under there and grab that.
Will this take me? Will this take you? I'm accused of, at least I could be vulnerable to trying to.
Trying to sway him. Yeah.
With the doll.
Yeah,
I appreciate